Dr. Abbasi qualified as a doctor in 2004 from the University of Karachi and worked for the NHS starting in 2007. Between May 2017 and August 2019, she worked at Newham University Hospital as a senior specialist registrar in Gynaecology and Obstetrics, and also undertook locum shifts at Basildon University Hospital. It is alleged that between 18 and the 23rd of July 2019, she worked overlapping shifts at both hospitals, and failed to complete or be present for one of the two shifts within each overlapping pair. It is also alleged that she worked without sufficient rest between a number of these shifts. Additionally, it is alleged that on 2 dates in August 2018 and 2 further dates in June and July 2019, Dr. Abbasi worked at Basildon University Hospital as a locum whilst on sick leave from Newham University Hospital, and that she provided a dishonest account of these actions to her employer. The concerns were raised with the GMC on the 30th of August 2019 by the medical director at Newham University Hospital. At the outset of the hearing, Dr. Abbasi through her counsel admitted the allegations. The tribunal now has to decide whether, based on the facts found to be proved, Dr. Abbasi's fitness to practice is impaired by reason of her misconduct. The GMC presented evidence in the form of witness statements and documentary evidence, including online referral policies, correspondence, booking confirmations, rota, locum doctor handbook, CV and testimonials, and CPD certificates. Dr. Abbasi also provided the tribunal with 2 witness statements and a document titled Reflections of 2021 to 2023. The GMC's counsel submitted that Dr. Abbasi's fitness to practice is impaired by reason of her misconduct, which includes working 81 hours over 5 days, exposing patients to risk of harm, multiple and planned acts of dishonesty, and booking and being paid for overlapping shifts on 4 separate occasions, and working for Basildon University Hospital while on sick leave at Newham University Hospital. He also submitted that her conduct was motivated by financial greed and is not easily remediable. The final decision on impairment of fitness to practice remains with the tribunal. Dr. Abbasi's counsel stated that Dr. Abbasi has conceded that her conduct amounted to serious misconduct and that her fitness to practice is currently impaired. He cited cases of Ahmed Soda v GMC and Swati v GMC to remind the tribunal that doctors have the right to challenge allegations made against them and that the fact they are challenged should not count against them. He acknowledged that Dr. Abbasi took some time to admit all of the allegations, but stressed that the tribunal should not use this as an adverse factor. The tribunal is responsible for determining whether a medical practitioner's fitness to practice is impaired. In approaching this decision, the tribunal followed a 2-stage process. First, determining if the facts as found proved misconduct, and second, determining if that misconduct led to impairment. Misconduct is defined as serious professional misconduct, falling short of what would be considered proper in the circumstances. The tribunal found misconduct proved on Dr. Abbasi's part. If misconduct is found, then the tribunal must determine if Dr. Abbasi's fitness to practice is impaired at the time of the hearing, taking into account conduct at the time of the events, any relevant factors since then, and the need to uphold professional standards and public confidence in the profession. The tribunal also referred to guidance provided by Dame Janet Smith in the 5th Shipman Report, which includes considering if the practitioner had acted in a way that put patients at unwarranted risk of harm, brought the medical profession into disrepute, breached fundamental tenets of the medical profession, or had acted dishonestly. The tribunal determined that Dr. Abbasi's conduct in working shifts without sufficient rest periods between them amounted to misconduct and had the potential to place patients at unwarranted risk of harm. The tribunal also found that the misconduct was liable to bring the medical profession into disrepute and breached a fundamental tenet of the medical profession in failing to put the interest of patients before her own interests. The tribunal also found that Dr. Abbasi acted dishonestly. In considering whether Dr. Abbasi's fitness to practice is currently impaired, the tribunal considered the evidence of her level of insight into her misconduct, its seriousness and its consequences. The tribunal determined that Dr. Abbasi did not fully appreciate the risks to patient care that her misconduct had given rise to, and her written reflections on her dishonesty were not sufficiently detailed. Accordingly, the tribunal determined that Dr. Abbasi's fitness to practice is impaired by reason of her misconduct. After the tribunal has found that Dr. Abbasi's fitness to practice is impaired due to misconduct, the tribunal moved to determine what appropriate sanction, if any, to impose. The tribunal took into account various forms of evidence, including Dr. Abbasi's own oral testimony and reflections, as well as her bank statements, ARCP forms, and previous records of competence. Dr. Abbasi accepted that her actions were dishonest and regrets them, and has taken measures to prevent similar behavior in the future. The GMC argued that erasure is the only appropriate sanction. The tribunal stated that the purpose of any sanction imposed is not to be punitive, but to protect patients and the wider public interest. They also considered the principle of proportionality, balancing Dr. Abassi's interests with the public interest. The tribunal took into account the seriousness of Dr. Abassi's dishonesty, noting that it is episodic and consistent with diary disorganization and some degree of stress, rather than a campaign of persistent, repetitive and premeditated dishonesty. The tribunal also considered references provided by 2 educational supervisors in January 2023. The Medical Practitioners Tribunal considered whether to take no action, impose conditions, or suspend the registration of Dr. Abassi, who had engaged in misconduct, including dishonesty and putting patients at risk of harm. The tribunal determined that taking no action or imposing conditions would not be sufficient, appropriate, or proportionate in light of the seriousness of the misconduct and would not adequately uphold the public interest. Therefore, the tribunal ultimately decided to suspend Dr. Abassi's registration, citing the serious nature of the misconduct and the need to protect the public and maintain public confidence in the medical profession. The tribunal considered that 6 months suspension is the appropriate and proportionate length to mark the seriousness of the misconduct. The tribunal considered whether an immediate order of suspension should be imposed in accordance with Rule 1720 of the rules and had regard to the sanctions guidance, November 2020. The tribunal found that the risk of repetition in this case was low and that there was no public interest requirement that necessitated the need for an immediate order of suspension. Therefore, the tribunal concluded that it was not necessary or proportionate to impose an immediate order in this case. Dr. Abassi's registration will be suspended 28 days from when notice of this decision is deemed to have been served upon her, unless she lodges an appeal. If Dr. Abassi does lodge an appeal, her registration will remain unaffected until the outcome of any appeal is known. There is no interim order to revoke.